What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Press Break Podcast. Tyler, Chelsea, Jamie back. It's postseason play, y'all, which means we got to be in our top form, our top everything today. We are recording this. I want to make this very clear because obviously games are going every night at this point. We are recording this on Tuesday afternoon. So we have only seen game ones at this point. Obviously, I know Tuesday night we have the Liberty series versus Dream and the Storm and Aces both playing tonight. So we'll have those probably before this drops. But going off on game ones, we got our game one reactions here. Very general, just very loose conversation, just talking playoff hoops. It's my two favorite words in the world is postseason basketball. Let's just go in order, y'all, for Sunday. And one of the games that will be played tonight is game 2 of the Dream versus Liberty. I have thoughts on the Atlanta Dream, but I'll stomach those a little bit. Chelsea, just general thoughts just from game 1 and how it feels it might determine game 2 and a potential game 3.
Yeah, what really confused me about game 1 is that, it was the fourth quarter. You're only down, 15 points. And for some reason, the Atlanta Dream pulls all their starters and goes with, almost like a garbage time lineup. Mm-hmm. But you have a full quarter, and you're not down. It's not like you're down by 30. You're down by, 20 to 15, sometimes even less. Mm-hmm. And, maybe you're trying to change it up, give your bench a chance to make something happen. But you're also playing against Stewie, Sabrina, and Jonquel Jones. And my main thought watching that was okay, I kind of knew this is probably where it was going in terms of the final result in game 1 and probably game 2. But why are we giving up at the beginning of the fourth quarter? And I feel like we don't even really need to get into that because that's just my thoughts. There's really no analysis to do on that. You just take out your
It's just a big question mark.
Yeah. That's how I left that game, honestly. That was my vibe. Not surprised by the result, very confused by the methods.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, that's what's odd about that game is it ends up being a 14-point Liberty victory, right? And that's off of a 13-point advantage after the first quarter. So you play the rest of the game nearly dead even. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that, and especially in the fourth quarter, the Dream did make up some ground even with kind of a funky lineup, and a lot of that was also the Liberty then giving some of their players rest. Mm-hmm. But it definitely, for 3 quarters of that game being nearly dead even, it simply did not feel that way. And mostly because I think it wasn't treated that way. I would have liked to see a little bit more maybe momentum put together or things figured out where when you start to compete as the quarters go on, when you go from a 13-point deficit in the first quarter alone to a 5-point deficit in the second quarter alone to a 2-point in the third, and then you win the fourth quarter by 6, you would think, oh, well, maybe you're figuring some stuff out that you can go to try to extend this into a 3-game series. But instead, it just felt like the Dream were going with whatever the Liberty were doing and just kind of going with the flow there and not really forcing any issues, just saying, well, we're just kind of here. It's too late for them to tank. They're in the playoffs, and that's what happened. It was just very bizarre.
Yeah. Agree across the board from me on that. It just felt this isn't game 22 of the season. This is playoff basketball. And it just felt like there was a general lack of urgency across the board from Atlanta that I just couldn't really comprehend, honestly. And that's from from the rotations just to sometimes just the energy, just didn't always. It didn't feel like they were playing playoff basketball to me. To be frank about it, it did not feel like that. And it's kind of my thoughts on the Dream are not hidden by any means, and the frustration I've had with them, but even to a point of my biggest frustration has been finishing games with this Dream team, and it felt like they never really completely got started in this one. In a way, you have the slow start in the first quarter, and you definitely made up ground throughout, but it was just in I don't know if lackadaisical way is like the term of doing it, but like it never felt like, all right, what are we gonna do about it? If they're winning right now, where is the stand that we're gonna take? And it just never felt like the Dream really ever took one. So even though the points were kind of coming, it never once at all to me felt like the Liberty were threatened at all.
It felt like they went into this game / probably the series being like, oh, we're the 8th seed, we're gonna be going home anyway, like why try? But like at the same time, like it's not impossible. Like
well, that's the thing. Like we've thought. I mean, they have talent. It's no secret they have talent. Tina Charles is having a ridiculous season. Like it's not. We should be talking about the Dream as the team that is arguably the most capable of providing us an upset in the first round, just based like on paper talent, and we just haven't had that this season. On the Liberty side, though, I do want to point out Leonie Fiebich getting to the starting lineup, cooking. Felt like she just could not miss a shot. But just general thoughts for y'all on that move. I think it's a move that we have had sample size of throughout the season with Courtney Vandersloot being out during different times. So this is not something that is brand new by any means, but certainly a big decision to make going into the playoffs. So for y'all, what did y'all like or dislike about the move?
Yeah, I mean, it's bold to do that in the postseason, but it's not like it's shocking, you know?
I see that's where I'm at with it, where it was like, frankly, I have personally thought that it makes more sense for Sloot to be coming off the bench, just generally speaking, throughout the entirety of the season. And so it just felt like vindication for me, honestly, just because I think at times Sloot can kind of be a little standstill on the offensive end for the Liberty and isn't, it's obviously capable of knocking down a perimeter shot, but like isn't like when I'm thinking of the way Fiebich was shooting the ball on the perimeter, that's not what I think of Sloot. As opposed, and you want Sloot to have the ball in her hands. He's arguably the greatest point guard that we've ever seen. Like we want her to have the ball in her hands, and I think she can do that with the second unit when Sabrina is not on the court. So I love the move. I think that is a move that if this is what we're getting from Fiebich, that's a championship winning possibility. Move. If this is how she's coming. Which I'm not expecting her to shoot. I think she missed like one shot the entire game.
Yeah, she was 7 for 8.
Right. So like I'm not expecting, that every it's unfair to expect that every game. However, if she does, hey.
And go ahead, Chelsea.
I was just gonna say, like, for people who have consistently been watching the Liberty every single game, like this isn't shocking. Like comes off of the bench or when she was starting while Vandersloot was away, like she plays with intensity. She's great at shooting. She's kind of one of those, she's like tall for her abilities, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like she has size, she has strength, she has the physicality needed to like thrive in this league, and she can shoot. And I think like that together, and she's like learning from Stewie, like doesn't get much better than that, And I just think that like it was such a great move just because she has the energy and the size needed. I mean, you're going against Tina Charles. You have to make sure that you're kind of making sure that your front court is able to sustain that. I mean, she's obviously one of the greatest players this league has ever seen. And at the same time, then you also have Courtney Vandersloot coming off the bench, who we all know is fantastic and can hold a bench down. So I think it's just knowing that their bench is a little bit less experienced playoff-wise, given that they have a few younger players like Sabali, for example, bringing that experience to the bench in Vandersloot, I think is also a great switch. I think like props to Sandy for doing it, because I know it's probably a little bit of a controversial / move, but at the end of the day, you want to win a championship, and I think all of the players should be with that mindset. So I loved it. I thought it was great.
So my last two thoughts on that, and then my one last one as a whole. I think that it shows that the Liberty are willing to like adjust and adapt even into the playoffs, which like for us, we've all expressed, all three of us over the past 2 episodes, that we weren't sure about the Liberty in the playoffs, about them making it to the championship, and got called haters for it, despite this being a widespread thing that a lot of the media talks about, a lot of the analysts talk about, just because as great as New York has looked at times, when they don't look great, it is baffling.
Yeah.
And so seeing, okay, what are the adjustments that can be made? So being willing to make that adjustment to the starting lineup right off the bat in the postseason tells me that they're maybe more flexible. They're more willing to adjust the things that need to be adjusted and do what needs to be done to make that real postseason run, to make that push at the championship. And then on the other side of things, what I wanted to highlight was a player that is talked about a whole lot for the Atlanta Dream, but unfortunately not for what she does on the court and more for her lack of opportunity, which is Letitia Mihir.
Yep.
And how terrific she was in her 10 minutes. Very vindicating, I think, for a lot of her supporters, and would love to see her get more minutes again in the second round. Obviously, we know that that's kind of a coin flip half the time with Atlanta, but definitely vindicating for the people who have been championing her as a legitimate option, that she was in the top 5 for scoring in the game in only 10 minutes for the Dream.
Yep.
Yeah, and just to drop my little Canada bit in there, because, you know, if we're talking about Canadian player, I'm going to do that. But if you watch her in international basketball, like, she is that person, even when she does come off of the bench, who immediately makes an impact on a game, whether that's points, rebounds, defense. Like, she is that person you need to have as, like, your 6th person, or even, like, you know, 7th or 8th in the rotation. Like, the thing that has shocked me about her tenure on the Atlanta Dream is, like, how little minutes she's gotten, even though every time she comes in, she makes an impact. So that's what I'm going to say about her. But she always, like, that's just her. She always does that.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to our next game. That was, like I said, we're in schedule order from Sunday because we got a packed Sunday. It was a lot of basketball, but I loved it. It was great. The Connecticut Sun and the Indiana Fever. To me, Indiana looked pre-Olympic break. It's just like, it's a generalization, but that's kind of the sum of what a lot of what I saw personally. Chelsea, for you, what were your just general takeaways from this first game?
Oh man, I mean, I feel like this is going to be maybe bringing some stuff that we don't want to bring in, but Caitlin Clark didn't play as well as maybe was expected. She didn't shoot well from 3. You know, was able to do some stuff on other sides of the basketball or other sides of the court or whatever. But I think my key coming into this series, knowing that Indiana was the underdog, but also knowing that they have had like a boost recently, was like, Clark needs to shoot the lights out in order for this team to have a chance to win this series. Because ultimately, Connecticut is a great defensive team. They have intense, great offense. They have strong players. And at the end of the day, like, unless Indiana is shooting the lights out, aka Caitlin Clark is shooting the lights out, you're probably not going to come out of that the way that some fans may want. So it was a little bit disappointing to see, because obviously you want her to, you know, have a great playoff run, to play the way that, you know, she played back in the tournament, back, you know, those big moments, those big celebrations. But at the same time, Connecticut understood the assignment. They came in and they
putting DeWanna Bonner on Caitlin was an incredible adjustment that I was not expecting, but it makes total sense. Like,
total sense. You have to get someone on her that she had what, like 3 or 4 games with Dejanay Carrington on her, and maybe is kind of used to that assignment now. You switch up, you get someone with way more size on her. It was brilliant. It was perfect. And I mean, Connecticut is just that defensive-minded team. So obviously when they come to this Indiana team who thrives on offense, it's going to be an interesting matchup, because they're just so hard to get past. Yeah. So I definitely thought, I was impressed with how Indiana kind of kept themselves in it, regardless of Caitlin not having the best shooting night. But at the same time, I wasn't surprised with the fact that Connecticut coming in as like the quote-unquote villains of this series, because that's just the way the stories are working, unfortunately. They came in prepared and they have experience. And at the end of the day, that is so crucial in playoff hoops, because, you know, at the same time, you got to know what this moment is. You got to know what you're up against, and those little adjustments, perfect.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, knowing who Connecticut is as a team and what they're capable of defensively, this shouldn't be shocking. Maybe a little bit surprising, but not shocking. The big thing that I look at is, you know, what what the W is so good for with Caitlin is that she has so many weapons around her. She has so many other players that can contribute in massive, massive ways. And what we unfortunately saw a little bit was some of the traps that she fell into at Iowa at times when they struggled, which is that everything was on her, whether that's the reality or just the way that it was being treated, I'm not even going to get into that, but to go 2 for 13 from 3, just it's not going to get it done. And the issue was that no one else was giving her a compelling enough case to say that's not your best option. Obviously, Aaliyah going 8 for 14 from the floor, certainly much more efficient than anyone else that was out there for the Fever, but, not going to always be an option just because of the defensive presence of Connecticut. As you mentioned, having Duana on her was huge. I think back to, I've got a little bit of NCAA on the mind because I just did like 2 hours with Mark Schindler on it, but for instance, this past year, Iowa State, we had Naimir Dew, who's, like a 6'2" long forward. Mm-hmm. That was our primary defender to play against Caitlin and very nearly pulled off a crazy upset over them. So certainly a great move to switch things up. And then I want to highlight that it wasn't just Caitlin who wasn't producing. You've had Kelsey Mitchell, who has been terrific down the stretch. It was 7 for 10 from 2, but goes 2 for 10 from the 3. At a certain point, you have to have other options. To have Lexi Hull go 0 for 2 after the kind of performances that she's put together. I think that saying this looks like a pre-break Fever team is really apt. It's very simple, but I think accurate, Tyler, just that they did not look cohesive. To get absolutely nothing out of both Melissa Smith and Temi Fagbenle, that's just not going to get it done. You need to be able to rely on your depth. You need to have additional consistent performers, because otherwise a team with the defensive capabilities of Connecticut will be able to completely lock in on really both Caitlin and Kelsey. And when you can do that, then you don't even need to expend as much effort on Aaliyah, because they're just not going to be able to get her the ball if they're being locked down. So it's a tough one there. I'd be really interested to see how this second game goes, because it's either you adjust that it's really close or you don't. That is obviously the simplest thing. Either they win or they lose. Either they play well or they don't. But there's very significant changes that need to be made, but they're not easy to make against a team like the Sun. And also, the Sun shot 50% on 18 attempts from 3. They also were really good offensively.
That's what I was
so they put it all together. The Sun looks so threatening. That's almost my biggest takeaway is the Fever, it is what it is, but a lot of what happened was because of Connecticut dictating and really taking over the game. And if they can do that consistently throughout the playoffs, we're going to be talking about them for several more weeks.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fair. And the thing what's interesting to me about with Caitlin and Kelsey, obviously the percentage is nasty. It's just not good. I don't know, there's no other way around that. But I thought honestly several of the shots they were getting were shots that, they're probably pretty okay with taking. Not all of them, certainly, because there's a lot of threes. But I do think that there's just a world where some of those shots just go in, and we're just momentum and everything. We're potentially looking at a completely different game. So while there's certainly a lot to change and to try and pivot from, especially I think the biggest thing that everyone's kind of highlighted is DB on Caitlin and figuring out, okay, how do you adjust? How does Connecticut adjust back, and from that. The one thing I did want to point out, though, was Marina Mabry, just the absolute heater of a third quarter she had. I don't remember if I said it on here or Twitter. I know I said it on Twitter. This team for Connecticut might not be the best win-loss team of this era of Connecticut basketball, but man, when you have Marina Mabry, it just might be the most dangerous because it's just a certain variable that the Connecticut Sun have not had during this kind of Alyssa Thomas era of Connecticut Sun basketball. It's perimeter scoring in a guard that can create their own shots. DB can certainly shoot it. They've had certain shooters at times, but when it comes to being able to create your own shot and just being able to go here, give the ball, go find us a bucket. And Marina Mabry can do that, is capable of doing that, and did that in one of the most dominant ways I've seen her do it in that third quarter. That was pure hoops that she was getting on the offensive end. And just if that's the way Marina's coming this playoffs, it makes them incredibly more dangerous than even though we've seen Connecticut teams go to the finals, we've seen them make deep runs. I think this makes them more dangerous than they have ever been because you still have the inside presence, you still have the defense, and then you're adding a variable like that. It's insane. So I got my eye emojis out for Connecticut right now. Like we got to see.
The trade for Mabry honestly just added exactly what this team needed to get to the next level. And I do feel like you said, like Connecticut is one of the most successful postseason teams of the past couple seasons. Sure, they haven't like won, but they've made it to at least the semifinals or the finals for the past however many, I think it's almost 5 years now. And the thing that's always gotten them is like being against teams that have, you know, a Sabrina or a, you know, that shooter. And going to get Marina Mabry mid-season when you know that she wasn't really thriving in the position that she was in, and then bringing her literally to like, they were like, this is where we need you. Do exactly what you do. You don't have to change your game whatsoever. And then being able to switch with someone like Dejanay Carrington, who can like, not saying Marina Mabry's not a good defender, but you have that kind of like 1-2 punch of one of the best defenders in the league and then one of the best like shooters in the league.
It's just wicked, yeah. And
absolutely, like that trade.
Yeah,
perfect. Incredible.
And it'll be interesting seeing, especially with Ty Harris, the injury that we don't really know what we don't. I know she was walking around at practice putting weight on it and everything is what I saw today, but we haven't heard at the point of recording any official word on anything. We'll just have to wait and see on that. They play tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yep. So Wednesday, not tomorrow now, but Wednesday.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see on the official report on that. But obviously Marina just becomes even more important at that point, you know, if she's going to be the one kind of helping facilitate the offense. I do want to move on, but also shout out to Veronica Burton because some of the sequences she had in the game were phenomenal. Let's move on. Jamie, you were at this game. The Mercury and the Lynx.
Yes.
Just that lead off, like the experience, the thoughts, going like just call the ice.
Man, it was a blast. I was super jazzed. Like my mom just hit me up. She's like, any thought of like maybe trying to go to Minnesota for the Sunday playoff game because obviously college basketball official practices start this week. So like they actually didn't start Monday. They started Tuesday because of the way that they wanted their off days to land. So she's like, this could be my last real chance to like get up there, and especially the timing lined up really well. It's about 3 hours from Ames, so like we hit up Bridget. She was like, yeah, we got you. So like we were there. Her mom was right in front of us with a couple of their family friends, and so really a fun group there. But right next to them was like Courtney Williams' family, who are like the best vibes, like love them, love everyone there, but like, oh man, the environment, the fans were locked in. It was obviously a really wild game. It was almost like the anti Dream and Liberty game in that Minnesota started out so strong, had a 13-point lead after the first quarter, but then Phoenix really turned it on and were able to fight back. Part of that being, obviously, that Phoenix is so much better than we've seen most recently,
right,
with Ka out, but also just in general, they felt like at times things were not clicking in ways that did not make sense. And so all of a sudden here, they're rolling and they are a really threatening team. And so put on a crazy shooting performance to shoot 50% from the floor, over 50% from three for 14 threes in a loss. Abby's got hurt. Like that's really, really tough. And I know that there's a lot of discourse about fouls. Part of that I will say is that there's not a player on that team that matches up well with Nafisa Collier. Like that's just a fact. And so, say what you want to about fouls, about calls, things like that. But I'm biased. To my eye, like it's not that there was one thing that was gonna make the difference one way or the other, but I get it. Like it's gonna be a talking point when one team has 24 free throws and the other has 11. Anyway, all that aside, made it all worth it for Minnesota to give up that lead, to see Bridget hit that dagger in the last minute of the game. That went crazy. But man, it was such a fun game, and I have no reason to think that the next one won't be closer across the board, just because I think after that first quarter got done, Phoenix found themselves again, and they're gonna be hungry for this second one to extend the series, because especially, if you're getting back home for a game 3 with DT, with the experience you have, you got a slew of Olympians and you're mostly healthy. Like, obviously Celeste Taylor was shaken up, but hopefully she'll end up being all right. But either way, that's also not a starter of yours. So they certainly have a whole lot of potential. I would obviously personally like to see Minnesota just close it out, but they've got to be like just absolutely raring to go and smell that opportunity. Probably the best opportunity, in my opinion, of anyone to potentially take it to a 3-game series or even get that upset just because of what they showed in game 1.
Yeah, I agree. It was funny. We were messaging the whole time, and I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you're there!" Like, how does it feel to live my dreams? Anyway, but I think just like the main thing I took away from that game was like, one, we all knew Phoenix was better than the 7 seed. I think that was kind of obvious. Just, some bad luck in there with injuries in some games. I mean, a lot of their losses were close in the season. When you think about specific games, there was a lot of times that they were setting themselves up to win and then just like couldn't close out in the end. And I mean, it is what it is. But in the end, you have playoff Diana Taurasi, possibly her last games. Again, I'm not going to like say anything until it's 100%.
I don't know if anyone knows for sure.
No, he doesn't know for sure, quite honestly. I want her to play next season just because I love it. And I mean, she scored 22 points at 42 years old in a playoff game. Like,
she was also like -20 when she was on the court, though, which is kind of wild.
Jamie, don't bring down vibes with plus minus. Vibes is a stat.
The vibes are that she's like she can shoot, and that's fun, and I love watching her play. And like playoff DT is just like so much fun because you can tell she gets like so like into it, like everyone does, but like she's just more vocal about it. But anyway, like Kalia Copper playing, I think for me was the big like hang up on this series. Like if she played, then they had a better chance. If she didn't, I was kind of like, maybe this is a 2 and done. But her being in the series, I think, like Jamie said, probably the best chance out of all of these first round games to make it to 3 games. But then like, I think, like you said, Minnesota got lucky, but at the same time, we've seen it a few times where even with Connecticut, it was close, and then they just got lucky with having such a deep roster of people who can shoot, who can defend, all of that stuff. So I think they're just like built as one of those teams that, despite the fact that they had to kind of recoup in the end, if that's the right word, have the ability and the talent to do so. And I mean, it just makes it better that Bridget Carlton was the one who did it because, my personal agenda, Jamie's personal agenda, that's fun. But I just think like there were a couple of different options on that team who could have done that. It could have been Nafisa, could have been Kayla, could have been this person or that person. I do think it would be fun to go to 3 just because like playoff atmosphere in Phoenix, possibly DT's last game ever. The vibes would be there. That would be.
As a neutral observer, it'd be a blast. As someone who wants Minnesota to win, I'm like, no.
Exactly. But also you have to think about Natasha Cloud. Like,
she's crazy.
Very well might have been her best game of her career. It was either that or like the game last year in the playoffs. Like,
yes, and now's the time to do it. Like she's a playoff, like, one of those people who just thrives in the playoffs. Chelsea Gray-ish kind of vibes, which I will get to. But yeah, I do think this is the best chance out of all the series to go to 3 games. I think it's going to be really close and really exciting. And I'm down for more Bridget Carlton game daggers because that's fun. So
there you go. Yeah, I was pretty shocked to see. Frankly, the Mercury are built for now. Like it was never about. Like, obviously, the regular season matters, but it was never about the regular season for this roster. That was just to get prepared for this and like just make it in, and then we'll go from there. So I was honestly pretty shocked to see them come out slow. In that sense, just because like this is like what they're built for. Like you have multiple champions on this. You have multiple players that have gone deep. You have not just champions, but like players that were very large contributor, multiple Finals MVP. Like there's a lot of experience on this team. Just so to see them look kind of just shaky to begin with was pretty shocking to me. I expected Minnesota to win, but just not in this way. And I think, frankly, to a point, it kind of shows the difference between. Jamie, you kind of mentioned the difference between this game and the Atlanta game and the way you go down in the first quarter. How do you respond? this Mercury team, the makeup of it is a team that's going to respond. Like you think of the personalities on this team and everything, they're just not going to roll over.
They didn't even make up any ground in the second quarter.
No,
like, they
it was
still
all
lost
in the second half.
quarter by one.
Like,
it was all in the second half, but they never let up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's,
I think that just also proves like the benefit of playoff experience and like competition experience, because like you know that these games are so roller coastery, and you know that the vibe can change instantly, that you just always have to make sure that you're like putting yourself and giving yourself that chance. Whereas like Atlanta, it felt like, again, like a game 22, like we were saying, like, oh, like, guess this one's over.
Yeah. So that's what was pretty interesting to me. But also for Minnesota, even with the comeback, like that as a team in general, like dropping a lead that was that large, it can rattle you. And I never once really felt that Minnesota was rattled. So like even as the game continued to get closer and closer, I still was like, oh dang, like this is happening. But I was never like, oh, Minnesota looks shook. Like it was never that. And like that was very interesting to me. Jamie, go ahead.
It's like how I said, we talked so much about Indiana, but ultimately it felt more like what Connecticut did than anything that was wrong with Indiana. And honestly, it felt more like Phoenix just turning it on and Minnesota having already built up that lead. But then it's not like they were making like all these horrifically baffling decisions. They ended up with 10 turnovers on the game. Like Alana Smith struggled, but it's a tough matchup for her. Like they knew what they had to do, and they knew that Phoenix was going to respond. The way they did was really impressive, but to withstand that kind of shooting effort. And then, man, shout out Maisha Hines-Allen. You talk about a game changer. She pops in and she's like, yeah, it's my second possession in, and I'm just going to take this sucker coast to coast. Like, okay, supreme confidence. Okay, like been there before. Like, oh man, I've loved her in Minnesota, but that she was so crucial.
Yeah, no, I feel you, and also you can't even like. I mean, I think we've become a bit accustomed to what Fee has been able to do this season, but 38 points is ridiculous and
beautiful. So efficient with it.
Yeah,
like almost 60%, bro.
Like, come on, it's like she
came out for 9 seconds.
That's a. I'm talking about MVP performances. She just happened to be in the year of Asia Wilson. Any other year, it's Feast. So like it's like this is I'm not surprised by that at all, and completely rose to the moment. But speaking of teams that have champion experience, that are playoff built, have been here before, the Storm and the Aces. This was a fun one. This feels ridiculous that we're getting it in the first round. Like now that like it's really here and happening. Like when you think about like how these teams are made up, like this is an insane first round series, and it feels like the exact. This is what a 5-4 series is supposed to be. Like this is like a coin flip. Like, but ultimately it came down to the fourth quarter where the Seattle Storm didn't score a field goal. 2 free throws from Skylar Diggins-Smith was it, and frankly. I've said it before, when it comes to when things are going wrong, where do you go? And having that foundation, and they did not go back to that foundation, which I feel should be Neko Gumake, but alas, this was close, and it was still close throughout, but man, that fourth quarter got brutal. Chelsea, for you, what were your takeaways from this game?
Oh man, it was so disappointing to see how well Seattle played in the first 3 and how well their defense was the whole time, and then to see it kind of fall apart like that. Like when you think about a whole game, like Seattle was the better team for most of the game and then just fell apart in the fourth offensively. And then obviously you're facing a team like Las Vegas who's going to take that momentum and that energy and use it to their advantage. Again, just like playoff experience and not counting yourself out when you're not having a very good game. I do think the one thing, I mean, you can see by the score, but it wasn't a very good offensive game for either team.
No.
Drew Lloyd only scored 6 points. Kelsey Plum scored 2 points. It was rough sometimes. It looked like there were lids on those baskets. But at the end of the day, like Seattle did everything that they should have in order to win this game. And they were very close to stealing this game from Las Vegas. And the fact that it was offense for this team that is built in a way that
they got buckets on this team.
Like, you got buckets. You got Skylar Diggins-Smith. You have Drew Lloyd. Like that should not be the issue. And so I feel like they it's one of those things where I feel like you just have to forget about going into game 2. Like, you need to forget that happened, treat this as its own game, try to extend the series, because ultimately, because it's a 4-5 like series, like both have such a great chance to win. Like, and I do think on the Aces side, again, like the fact that they held A'ja Wilson to 21 points, which we all know is low for her. They held Kelsey Plum to 2 points. Nobody scored over 20 points except A'ja with 21 and Tiffany Hayes off the bench with 20.
It was huge, yeah.
Huge. But like at the same time, like none of your other starters are shooting or scoring more than like, I think it was like 15 or 16 points. And so like their offense definitely didn't look as powerful, because this is a team that can shoot the lights out, that can win games by 40 points, and we've seen it happen. So I was impressed with Seattle for most of the time, disappointed at how it ended, but a little bit worried about the Aces, not fully in the grand scheme of things, but also just like, maybe you should start out a little better next time. Like, I think the key for them is starting out better. I mean, they lost the first quarter 18-9, I think, and for a team that's so powerful, like it shouldn't be like this. And I know we hold the Aces to a higher standard, which is why I'm being critical like this. Ultimately, it wasn't awful. They won the game, which is the most important part. But I know that locker room was not happy with that performance.
No, and for Seattle too, like, and Jamie, I'll let you go after that. It's important to note to me, like, A'ja Wilson had 21 points. It was on 21 shots. Yeah. Like, losing a game.
That's usually like the barometer, where if you can hold a player to shooting as many or more shots as points at that volume.
And so, like, even though like A'ja was certainly was able to find some level of success for A'ja Wilson standards, which I feel like are even higher than Aces standards, this is a game you got to win. If you're holding A'ja to 21 points on 21 shots, and especially the way that she started the game, because it was definitely a better second half for her on the offensive end, because that first quarter was brutal. Like for A'ja, really the first half was just rough, just a lid on the basket. But losing this game feels awful. Like it's gotta make your stomach turn if you're Seattle. Jamie, for you, what were your takeaways?
So one, I'm gonna get back to the points that I was planning on, because I just noticed this weird thing. No missed free throws in this game. Like the composure that we're seeing in the first game of the playoffs is really impressive, because I didn't even mention, the Lynx went 24 for 25.
Yeah, which is crazy. Yeah,
that's wild. Super impressive. But then Seattle as a team, 13 for 13. Las Vegas as a team, 11 for 11. So like very, very impressive performances there. We know how difficult that is. But it's interesting. There's been this concern with the Aces last year and then this year as well about their lack of depth, about their bench. And so for them to completely flip that on its head here in this game, and for that to be the difference in the matchup, where they outscore Seattle's bench 27-10, with Jordan Horston having 10 points off the bench, had solid minutes, but she didn't have a ton of opportunity. She was 3 for 4 from the floor. She was 4 for 4 from the free throw line, and played just under 20 minutes. Like, Jordan, I thought was great. But it's more to say how incredible Tiffany Hayes was, which for my money is 6th player of the year. There's some other arguments that could potentially be made, but I think that she has an extremely compelling case. I'm not even going to get into that because we'll go way too long, but she was incredible. Again, just experience shows. And ultimately for Seattle, just the fact that they were not able to find additional options, the fact that they were not really able to adjust as the game wore on, as shots quit falling, that's disappointing. And we talk about how A'ja had 21 points on 21 attempts. On the other side, Nneka had 13 on 17 attempts. Skylar had 16 on 15 attempts. Gabby Williams had 14 on 15 attempts. So what they were able to do to A'ja,
they did for the whole team, pretty much.
They got it, top to bottom. Yeah, so
sure.
that ain't gonna get it done. The first quarter, and really the first half as a whole is more what I was anticipating from this series, and then that fourth quarter was kind of a meltdown, but it was building throughout the course of the game to never get Jewel Lloyd going. Side note, shout out Mercedes Russell. I have not always been the most impressed with her. She's tall. She can turn it on, but she hasn't been consistent to step in the way she did with Ezzy out.
Mm-hmm.
She's not a huge offensive force, but you got 12 rebounds.
Yeah.
That's solid.
That's a
Turnovers,
solid
you got to
for-
shore those suckers up. But like, she definitely she shouldn't be playing 32 minutes a game. Like that's not the role that she has been playing on this team all season. And so to do that in the playoffs against the Aces is kind of crazy, very impressive. So I think that if they were to get Ezzy back and Mercedes could then contribute off the bench, that'd be huge. But I don't know if they have a timeline on that. I haven't seen any timeline on that.
Last she's supposed to be playing. The Storm injury report is clean.
That certainly could make a massive difference. But yeah, ultimately the Aces are going to do what the Aces are going to do. And by the end of the game, we were getting a little bit more of the Chelsea Gray that we all know and love, the playoff Chelsea Gray. Like first play of the game, I'm like, oh, she's back. And then a little bit of a lull, but by the end,
as soon as that clock ticks over to the fourth quarter, it's Chelsea Gray time. Like
that's when you get like the LeBron, like the.
It's literally like when you're gaming, you sit up in your chair. It's
not
like,
for real, exactly.
That's what it is. Like she sat up in the chair and it was that time. But yeah, any closing thoughts, y'all, before we go? Obviously, we'll have 2 game 2s tonight when we're recording this, 2 on Wednesday, and then we'll be back. It'll be second round by the time we come back. So it'll be fun. But we're gonna be with you guys the entire way throughout the playoffs. So make sure you guys like, subscribe, rate if you're on podcast platforms. For Tyler, Chelsea, Jamie, we'll see you next time.